I recently attended a historical cookbook education seminar at the UFT Rare Books Library, and shortly after completing the seminar, ended up finding a manuscript on Etsy. Manuscripts are interesting because they were never intended to be published. They were just collections of recipes that the owner really enjoyed. But we can use manuscripts to determine tastes, interests, and trends from different time periods. This manuscript is from 1911, and it's hard to say where it was created, but I definitely know that it is Canadian in provenance because it was from a bank agenda that listed all kinds of information about Canadian banks, so I don't see how anyone else could find something like this useful. The word Madge is written on the front cover, and so I imagine that the owner's name was Madge. As you can see, the condition of the manuscript is very delicate, so I am taking care to make sure that I'm handling it appropriately. Industry standard for rare and old books is clean and dry hands, so that is why I'm not wearing gloves. What I find interesting is that you can clearly tell this was meant for a daily planner, but she repurposed the book to make just a regular notebook for all of her recipes. You also see this element of community sharing, as many of the recipes have the names of the contributors listed beside them, in particular Mom and Auntie. The first recipe I'm trying is the first recipe in the manuscript for nut bread. This one was pretty easy to investigate, as all of the measurements were listed in cups and teaspoons and tablespoons, so things that I'm very familiar with and most cooks of today would be. The only question I had is, what did a moderate oven mean in 1911? As she says to cook the bread in a moderate oven for an hour. 1911, obviously, these are wood-fired cast iron ranges, so temperature, heat is not something that is as easily regulated as today. In the description, you'll find download links to my translations of the recipes if you want to try them at home, but I was able to determine that I believe a moderate oven is around 350 degrees. Another thing I found really interesting is she specifically states to use Magic brand baking powder, which we still have today. And the packaging design has not changed. The only real difference is that they're made out of plastic now instead of metal, but the label design is basically the same. The contents of the bread recipe are definitely not like a bread, but I would say more like a cake or loaf. It's very dense and a little bit spongy. So I could definitely see this going really well with coffee or tea, or warming it up in the morning with some butter, or just as an afternoon snack, but it is not intended to be a sandwich bread. At least I don't think so. Maybe for PB&J though, it could be interesting. So once the dough was all mixed up, you were supposed to allow it to rise for half an hour. Once again, very interesting because there's no yeast in it, just baking powder. And as you can see from the pour, it was a very thick, dense, and sticky batter. But the final result ended up being really, really good, and really good for the first try as well. Overall, it was a really dense cake, and the sweetness level I found was perfect. It wasn't too sweet, and it was just sweet enough to enhance the flavor of everything else. So I would definitely be making this one again. And now that I have your attention, a brief channel announcement. So it's been a while since I've checked in and just chatted, and I'll keep this brief to get back to the cooking, but some changes are going to be happening around my channel, and I just wanted to kind of briefly introduce what those things are going to be. So first of all, I have a ton of new subscribers, so thank you so much for being interested in my content, my approach to history, and sort of, I guess, my developing filmmaking style. So basically, what's going to be happening is I'm going to be using my YouTube channel, my platform, to be sharing my master's thesis project, which is going to be all about Canadian culinary history in the 19th century. I know this is a bit of a departure of the stuff that I usually do, which is mostly focused around costuming, but it's going to be a temporary content shift, so for the next 6 months to a year, and then I'll be going back to the regular stuff. But I do hope you stick around because I mean, this is a massive project. I've been working on this for over a year already, and there will be an official project announcement coming up soon, which will basically go over what the project is going to be about, what you can expect from me, and just discussing a little bit about my approach and why I've chosen to do a video project instead of a traditional paper. The series itself is going to be living history, immersive, so I will be in historical costume in a historical setting. If you enjoyed my Victorian picnic video that I did at Bradley House last summer, take that as a proof of concept, and that's basically how the rest of my thesis is going to look in terms of look and feel. And as well as content, it's actually going to be much more of a deep dive in each episode. So I really hope you love it, and I'm really excited to get the project underway. We're so close. I'm still doing a bit of research, finalizing my locations, and all that kind of stuff. But I hope you'll stick around and, you know, kind of have a chance to look at Canadian history in a different way. So costuming stuff will be on hold after this video. This is kind of my last video of regular content, and then it'll be master's thesis for a couple of months, a few months, or several months. But yeah, so that's just a heads up. There will be an official project announcement, but this is kind of just to say, hey, get excited, tell your friends. I'm really hoping to have some engagement, some feedback, and even suggest some ideas, and maybe it'll be turned into an episode, so who knows. So that's piece number one. Piece number two is actually about my channel name. I've been using By Golly Miss Holly since I started the channel 3 years ago, and I feel maybe like I've outgrown it a little bit. It's fun, I love it, but I'm wondering if maybe I should change it to something a little bit more professional? I don't know. So I wanted to field the question, see what you guys thought about it. If I were to change it, it would just be to H. Benison, which kind of falls in line with my own personal portfolio brand that I'm working on with my website, which is H. Benison History. So it would be a way to kind of just start connecting all of these things and really showing that, hey, YouTube videos might seem silly, it's, you know, on a social media platform, but at the end of the day, I am a historian, I am an academic, I am a scholar, so my approach to all my videos are rooted in research, in sources, in good scholarship. So just a way to kind of, I guess in a way, professionalize the channel. But By Golly Miss Holly is also what I've been making videos under for, like I said, 3 years, so maybe it's worth keeping. I'd love to hear your opinions on it, and without further ado, on to the second recipe, pineapple buns. This one was a little harder to figure out as the measurements were given in teacups and not cups. So I pulled out one of my teacups and I compared it against my regular cup measurements, and I found that my regular cups were higher in volume, so I decided, just to help myself understand and to translate it for later, I would stick with standardized cup measurements and just switch that over. Spoiler alert, it worked out totally fine. The first step was to cream together butter and sugar, and then you add in your egg, and this is all of the quote-unquote wet ingredients. There's no water, there's no milk, nothing else. And I'm going through the recipe, and all of that made me really nervous because if these are supposed to be buns, I had no idea how they were going to stick together. I also found that in the manuscript there are actually 4 pineapple recipes, and this was really interesting for me for 1911 because it really exemplifies the increased globalization and availability of what would be considered exotic fruits here in Canada. And also the availability of canned goods. So you could go to the store and buy canned pineapple and be able to have it in your home, when this was kind of a new thing that globalization was introducing to the food-based marketplace. So by the time I'd mixed it all together, the dough ended up being quite sticky, and I could form these small buns rather easily, and for the most part they did stick together quite well. They cooked in the oven for half an hour. And when I did a taste test, I was actually blown away by the texture. The flavor itself, I think, could have been enhanced by more vanilla or more pineapple. But to describe the texture of these buns, it's a cross between a scone and a shortbread cookie. Absolutely amazing. Definitely recommend this one. But overall, I hope you enjoyed this experimentation, and if you try the recipes yourself, let me know.